top stories, reports say a British passenger has survived a crash involving a Gatwick airport-bound plane, which went down in a fireball shortly after takeoff in India. The survivor says he has no idea how he escaped the aircraft, his relatives have said, a warning some viewers may find the following footage distressing. The Air India flight, which was carrying more than 240 people from the city of Ahmedabad, including 53 British nationals, collided with a medical college earlier today. The Hindustan Times said 40-year-old British man Vishwash Kumar Ramesh survived the crash, telling the newspaper 30 seconds after takeoff there was a loud noise and then the plane crashed. It all happened so quickly. Video circulating on social media shows massive plumes of smoke rising into the sky near the airport in Ahmedabad, the largest in the state of Gujarat. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer said the crash was absolutely devastating and that the investigation will take some time. The King says he and Queen Camilla express their deepest possible sympathy to those who await the news of loved ones. In a statement posted on Facebook this evening, Gloucester Muslim community said Akil Nanabawa, his wife Hannah and their 4-year-old daughter Sarah had died in the crash. Tata Sons, which owns Air India, will offer around £86,000 to the families of each person who died in the crash, the company said. This is the first fatal crash involving a Boeing 787 Dreamliner, models of which have flown more than 5 million journeys across 14 years.
Good evening. Every time I hear the words plane crash, I shudder. Because, of course, as many of you will know, I was involved in a light aircraft crash and miraculously survived. So whenever I hear that phrase, I think, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Now, I think we do need some sense of perspective because fear of flying is very, very common. And yet the statistics actually for air safety are really remarkably good. Nonetheless, what happened this morning with an Air India plane due to come into Gatwick Airport, there are 242 people on the plane killed, many more on the ground killed. We're going to show you footage of the plane taking off and crashing. If you don't want to see it, please turn away. So the extraordinary thing about this is it all really looked rather normal. The plane takes off. I can't see any explosion. I can't see any particularly great wobble to left or right. Someone suggested maybe it was shifting cargo. I can't see that it's that. Yes, the landing gear is still down, but then the plane only ever reached 600 feet, and then it just seems to come straight down again. You might remember a few years ago in New York, there was a big triple bird strike on a plane that brought a plane down. Honestly, I don't know what happened. But there is one miracle, and there's the horrendous explosion. You can quite safely watch back now if you didn't want to watch that part, and I understand why if you didn't. But there's only one nice story. Here's a bloke who's walked out of the wreckage. Absolutely, totally extraordinary. There you go, you see, miracles can and do happen. But what happened? I'm joined by Emma Henderson, former airline pilot and aviation expert. Emma, good evening. I'm not an expert on this, but looking at the aeroplane taking off and coming down, I can't see what happened that was untoward. Can you?
Well, yes, looking at it from an aviation point of view, it is very unusual for the landing gear to still be down that long after takeoff. We would normally get the landing gear up almost immediately as the aircraft lifts away from the runway. So that is unusual. There will also be questions asked about the configuration of the wings, whether or not that was that was correct, and various other elements that we kind of not really expecting to see as pilots on an aircraft that's just taken off.
Now, there was a Mayday call put out, wasn't there? Do we know at what stage that call went?
Not really. And actually, that's information that's come to light very recently. So I don't know enough about that to know when that happened. But it does give you an indication that the pilots knew that something was wrong and they were trying to do something about it. But they almost certainly knew that they weren't going to be able to carry out certainly a successful and safe landing, which is quite chilling, really.
Yeah, and all of that perhaps explains why the landing gear was at 600 feet still down. I want you, Emma, to reassure GB News viewers and listeners, because fear of flying is incredibly common. But the truth is, if you measure, the accident rate flying commercially against driving around Britain's motorways, you are actually safer in the air, aren't you?
Yes, you are. And that's a really good analogy, because if you saw a motorway pile up, it would not stop you from getting in your car the next day to drive to work. And I think we need to respectfully put that in perspective. Obviously, today's been a terrible tragedy, but I actually flew into Inverness as this news was breaking this morning. I'm back at the airport again to get on a plane and fly south. So, it doesn't worry me, thought of flying, even with this having happened. But anybody who is looking at taking a flight this summer, perhaps, and is worried now about it, I would say don't be. The reason these stories make the news is because they don't happen very often. They're big news stories because a lot of people are involved. It's a terrible tragedy, obviously, but it's so unusual. And there's roughly 100,000 flights in the air every single day. So when you look at that and the statistics around that, it helps you to put it into a little bit more perspective.
Yeah. Well, Emma, thank you for joining us and putting this into perspective, because I think that's very, very important. Must admit, I flew today. I flew today myself after this, and, there we are. I know what the odds are. I'm joined in the studio tonight for my panel with Tom Pursglove, former Conservative Migration Minister. We might come to that this evening. And Kieran Andrieu, first time on this show, political commentator and Novara media contributor. I quite deliberately asked those questions, Kieran, because I do think there are times like this with stories where a lot of news channels just spread panic.
Yeah, and I think that there isn't much to say politically, is there, about this?
No.
It's a terrible human tragedy. It's not one really, certainly not at this stage and probably not at any stage, for politicisation. The one thing that came into my head when we were watching those scenes, when you talked about the chap who survived, is it reminded me of a documentary I watched about the Munich air disaster and about Matt Busby surviving it. And Matt Busby, for a long time, openly expressed that he wished he'd died because he felt
survivor's guilt.
Survivor's guilt.
Yes.
So, that's the only reflection I have at this stage. Terrible tragedy.
No, I'm just trying, Tom. As I say, I sometimes think that media channels, debate channels, news channels almost sensationalise these things so much that it sort of puts the fear of God into people, and there's no need, really, is there?
I actually think the only thing that we should all be thinking about today is the poor families caught up in this. I mean, you just can't imagine expecting to turn up at Gatwick Airport this evening to pick up a loved one and them not being there, and it just breaks your heart, doesn't it? And I think you've set some context, and your guests as well, I think, really importantly, just got that point across that you're far safer in the air than you are on the roads. We must never lose sight of that.
I was really keen to get that across to the audience this evening. Folks, there isn't much more to discuss or debate. We don't know anymore. There isn't, I think, as Kieran says, there's no political angle on this. There's no even suspicion of terrorism. It's just one of those horrid, awful things. And so our thoughts and prayers are with the victims, their families, and their close friends.